Guess what? Squatting this deep might not be the best thing for your hips. If you want to know how deep you should squat, check out the next video.
Let's go.
Hi, I'm Dr. Moses Bernard. I'm a chiropractor and mobility specialist, and I'm here at the Criticalbench compound with Coach Chris, and we're here to talk about squat depth and making sure that you're squatting in a way that works for your body. But before we get started, click on the pinned comment below for the Bodyweight Beast program. So, when we think about squatting deep, a lot of people, a lot of coaches will just arbitrarily decide at what squat depth is a good squat depth or a healthy squat depth, and we won't even look first to see what is this person's hips capable of. So before we even get into looking at what Coach Chris's hips can do, we first want to understand the anatomy of the hip joint and what makes sense and what we should be feeling when we go into certain ranges of motion. So as a general rule, anytime you go to an end of a range of motion, the thing that you want to feel stopping you is the stuff that's stretching. So if I lean my body like this, I want to feel some type of stretch on the side of my body. I don't want to feel any compression through here, all right? If I lift my arm up like this, I want to feel some type of stretching here. I don't want to feel anything here, okay? So that means if I pull my knee towards my chest, the tissue that's being stretched is this stuff right here. What I don't want to feel is compression into the front of my hip. If I'm feeling compression on the closing side instead of stretching on the opening side, that's a sign that the fundamental joint mechanics aren't doing exactly what they're supposed to do. If that's the case, make sure you consult with a movement specialist, some type of health professional, to ensure that your hip is doing what it's supposed to do. But if that's the case, we still do want to train. So we want to make sure that we're training within the capabilities of what your hip can currently do. So to take a look at this, I'm going to have Coach Chris, he's going to lie on his back and we're going to screen how much hip flexion he has with good movement. So we're going to take his hip and we're going to pull his knee towards his chest. So we're just going to look at a passive hip flexion. So I'm pulling his knee towards his chest and I'm going to let you know right here, here's where we're seeing the end of his range of motion, okay? So if we look at the plane of his thigh compared to his chest, you can see it's nowhere close. What does that mean for him when it comes to squatting? That traditional butt to ground, thigh all the way to your chest squat is just not going to be present. It's just not going to be available in his body. That doesn't mean he can't squat. That doesn't mean he can't be strong. If we're thinking more of a powerlifting type squat, well, he's way past 90 degrees, so he's got more than enough to be able to do that. But if we're thinking more Olympic lifting type squats, then we'd want to increase his range of motion. But let's work with the range of motion he's got. So as I bring him this way, Chris, where do you feel the restriction here?
I actually do feel a little bit down low here.
Cool. Do you feel anything on this side?
Not so much.
Okay, so this is a perfect example, and this is actually very, very common. Most of the people that I assess in my clinic, when I pull their knee towards their chest, they feel more restriction on the closing side versus stretching on the opening side. So most people have some weird hip stuff going on. Again, you want to find a professional to work with to deal with this. But in the meanwhile, let's just make sure we're not making it worse. So if he is squatting and the weight is forcing him into this range, what we're really doing is we're taking that hip joint and we're just grinding the bones against each other. Obviously, we don't want to do that. That just means we stop our range of motion, we stop our squat just a little shy of that. So if here is where it gets a little pinchy, if I bring him down just a little bit, here his hip works okay. So this is going to be the depth of range of motion for his squat. But now this is at an angle out to the side. There's some other angles we could play around with. So if I do it straight forward, so if we're doing some type of narrow squat for whatever reason, some type of hack squat, it stops even earlier. So if he's doing a hack squat, he's got a different range of motion depth that he's able to get to versus if he's doing a more traditional squat, okay? If let's say we're powerlifting, we're competing, and we want to find the range of motion that's going to be best for us, well, we can, if I go as wide as possible, there's a little bit of a wall here. There's a little bit of a lane where he's got a little bit more freedom of his hip, and straight forwards, there's not quite as much. So for him, making sure that we find the angle where he's got the most smooth hip flexion is chances are that's going to be the angle that's going to be the strongest for him. All right. So if we think of the hack squat, this is going to be about where he's able to get to. If we think of a more traditional squat, he might be able to get a little bit deeper. If we think of a super wide, more powerlifting style box squat, or a sumo deadlift even, not quite as much. So we want to first screen what are his passive abilities in his ability to move his hip. That is one part of it. Now let's go into the active component. So what I'm going to have you do, so I'm going to pull your knee this way. I'm going to let go. Try to stay there. So it doesn't budge. He owns it. So he's got control of his range of motion in that plane. If I bring him this way, I'm going to let go. Try to stay there. And you can see it peels away a little bit. So he's got a little bit more range than he has full control over. So if he's squatting deep, we want to make sure that he doesn't force himself. He doesn't allow the weight to drop him into a range that he doesn't have full ownership of. If we go even wider, I'm going to let go, try to stay there. Same type of thing. We want to make sure that he owns what he's got. Now, something to be aware of is we are doing this with him lying on his back. We don't squat lying on our back, we squat upright. So we want to test and challenge a lot of these same things in a more vertical squat position. So maybe stand up for me, please. And a really easy way to do this is up against the wall. Now, since we don't have a wall right behind us, I'm going to play the role of the wall for him. So what we're going to do is I'm going to have him pull his right knee up towards his chest. So you're just going to stand up, pull your knee to your chest. Good. So I'm going to hold it for him. Okay. So I'm going to let go. So let go with your arm. Okay. I'm going to let go. Let's see if he owns it in this position. And now that he's fighting against gravity, try to stay. Try to stay. Try to stay. Yep. Perfect.
Hold it.
I got you. Just try to pull that knee out. Good. Okay, so I'm gonna let go, try to stay there.
Yep.
Good, so you can see when he's fighting against gravity, he doesn't quite have as much control. So if he's doing a hack squat, we would wanna make sure that he doesn't go much deeper than this because that's now gonna be the weight forcing him into a place where his hip doesn't have great control over. If we think of the more traditional squat, so we're gonna come out at about a 45-degree angle.
Probably not that much there.
Okay, so here's about where he likes to squat, okay? Let's see his passive range. He's got a little more. I'm going to let go, try to stay there. Doesn't quite own it. So here is where he has neuromuscular control over his hip. So it's going to be safe for him to squat that range and higher. If he goes much deeper than that, yes, his joints can go there, but they aren't doing so with good, healthy joint mechanics. And if he's doing that over and over and over again with a lot of weight and a lot of load, chances are that's going to start to compromise the integrity of the hip. So we want to make sure that not only do we have the passive range to allow his hip to go into that range of motion, we want to make sure his hip has the active control to function there. So whatever he has both passive and active control over, well, now we can bring the rein. Now we can train that as hard as he wants. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned some new things about making sure that you are squatting to the appropriate depth for your body. Make sure you click like and subscribe and click on the pinned comment below for the Bodyweight Beast program. Again, I'm Dr. Moses Bernard. Thanks for watching.